I'm off to the hole in the road. I'm walking off school and I'm off to the city, watching telly all night and I'm not looking pretty. See, I got this job downtown, selling knocked off ladies' watches for £1. For a really dodgy man that I met in a dodgy cafe. You know, he said to me, the girl who sold these yesterday wasn't selling very carefully. Police came along and took her and all my watches away. So if you see some coppers, you grab my stuff and leg it, boy, right away. I'll be in the cafe. I'm just a boy from Sheffield, making his way through life. I'm just a boy from Sheffield, making his way. I'm just a boy from Sheffield, making his way through life.
Just a boy from Sheffield, making his way through life. That's me, Jason Holmes. It's Raconteurs News. Good evening and welcome to the 19th of April 2022. And we've got tons and tons and tons of comments already. We've got very little time with our guest tonight. I'd just like to say good evening to you. Good evening to everybody who's in the chat room. I hope you're having a good time. I hope you can hear me okay. But we've got our guest for this evening. He's here for an hour. So we're going to get as much out of him as we can. He's an author. He's a filmmaker primarily. He's just written a book called Moon Man, which I've just a couple of chapters into, but I'm really into it at the moment. But it's explaining a lot of the stuff behind the films. A funny thing happened on the way to the moon and Astronauts Gone Wild. So we're going to welcome him. Good evening, Bart Sibrel. How are you?
I'm doing good, Jason. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'm very good. Where are you speaking to us from today?
I'm from Antarctica, here with Buzz Aldrin, checking out the aliens. We're at the bar with them. They drink like 100% distilled alcohol. I can't handle it, but they're trying to drink us under the table. But what can you do? You know.
Exactly. Neil A, though, that is alien backwards, isn't it? Neil Armstrong, Neil A, alien it's alien backwards. So that's an interesting point. Anyway, where do we start? I mean, what do you want to talk about first? Do you want to talk about the books? I've read the first couple of chapters when I knew you were coming on. I meant to get to it this weekend, but it's been bank holiday weekend. It's been a bit mad, and my wife's had a birthday this weekend as well, so we're a bit busy with that. But I've read a couple of chapters today, and I'm really interested in reading the rest of it. Shall we start off with how you began? I mean, we're going back quite a while now, aren't we? And I think what I would class A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon as one of those seminal films that you see, you know, when you're going through when you realize that everything's not as it was, which started me off with 9/11 and things like that. But it's one of those. It's like a rite of passage in it that everybody's got to see. So tell us the story about that, because it is quite a long story, isn't it?
Well, I'm primarily known for having exposed that, unfortunately, the moon landings were indeed fraudulent. I, like most people, grew up believing that they were real. I was actually just 4 years old at the time of the first claim to have put men on the moon, asleep in bed. However, my father was an officer in the United States Air Force, and he got a VIP package of about 20 9x12 color prints from the first alleged mission to the moon. So he gave them to me. They were a cherished gift. I had them up on my bedroom wall for 10 years, from the age of 4 to 14, until I ever even considered the possibility that the moon landings were fraudulent. I thought it was the greatest thing. And then when I'm 14 years old, I saw a gentleman on television by the name of William Casing, who worked for Rocketdyne, a contractor of NASA, for 6 years during the Apollo program. This gentleman had very high security clearance because he would edit the memos going from Von Braun to the Pentagon and back to correct their grammar to make them look a little more educated than they really were. And he saw many classified memos, one of which was from Von Braun himself, that said the likelihood of going to the moon on the first attempt with 1960s technology was 1 in 10,000 chance. And so they basically faked it like a bluff in poker. Now, go forward another 10 years into the future when I'm 24, I had become a filmmaker and I was actually editing a film for the man who had produced the TV show I'd seen 10 years earlier, questioning the authenticity of the moon mission. So I asked him, what was the name of that guy, who said we didn't go to the moon? I'm kind of curious about that. I was put in touch with Bill Casey, and he's the one who first suggested that as a filmmaker, I do a documentary about the moon landing fraud. So I did about 6 months of preliminary research, found out that shadows that should always be parallel in sunlight often intersected at 90 degrees, which is absolutely proof of electrical lighting, which means they're not on the moon. And 2 of the 3 astronauts on the first mission never gave interviews. The administrator of NASA resigned kind of oddly right before the first mission. The Soviets were much more advanced, had launched the first satellite, animal, man, woman, spacewalk, crew of 3, 2 crafts at the same time. And yet somehow we went to the moon. And so I considered it at that time, based on the evidence I had uncovered thus far, that there was at least a 1 out of 4 chance that the moon missions were fake. So seeing how this could be dangerous if it were, in fact, fraudulent to investigate such a thing, I originally turned down the project. I said, I want to have a wife and family someday. I'm not going to risk my life for what Nixon did, many years ago. Another 5 years went by. I had another client who suggested that I read the Bible. And so I started reading what was called a 1-year Bible. I started June 3rd, 1989, the day the gentleman stood in front of the tanks in China. And over the course of the next 5
Tiananmen
years,
Square.
that's right, I had read the Bible 5 times from cover to cover. I wasn't a Christian exactly. However, it did convince me that there is a creator. Things don't make themselves. A flower and a bee can't simultaneously know of each other's existence and evolve when they're 100% dependent on each other. And it does kind of make sense in our core of our nature that there's a judgment for how we live life here on earth, and that if you are judged, I guess, in a good light, then you'll live eternally and those other people won't be dead forever. So it convinced me of a struggle going on between right and wrong, between good and evil, which is often kind of demonstrated in truth versus lies. And then I realized, if they did fake the moon missions, that's actually more profound of an event in history than if they'd actually gone. I mean, if they really faked them, lied to the encyclopedias, lied to Congress, lied to the world, lied, and embezzled billions of dollars, that's more significant than if they'd actually gone. And so I realized, if that's true, the world needs to know this. And I said, I'm going to die anyway. And this is a matter of right and wrong. So after 5 years of being afraid to make the movie, I changed my mind. And I said, I'm going to die anyway. I might as well die for a just cause. So my main investor put up $1 million to make these movies. He's a board member of an aerospace company that builds rockets for NASA, who knows the moon landings were fake. So the film took, a funny thing happened on the way to the moon, about 7 years to produce, and about 3.5, 4 years into the film, I pop in a tape that apparently a whistleblower gave me from NASA, but I had on my shelf for many years. And it said, do not show to the public on the screen. And when I hit fast forward, I see the same, scene for a full hour. It's a special effects shot.
Where had you got this? Where had you got this tape from? Was this a tape that you'd asked NASA for, or and had just been, you'd put away and thought, well, that's going to be part of me research in future. I'm going to be looking at these, or was it something that you'd already had? Somebody had actually come to you and give it you?
Well, in my investigation of this, I assumed that if the moon missions were fake, they're more likely to have made a mistake the first time they faked it because they had never faked it before. So I asked NASA for every single still picture, every single reel of video footage, and every reel of film footage of just the first mission. I told them I was doing a documentary about the moon landings, which is true. I wasn't about to tell them I'm trying to see if they really went or not, because then I wouldn't get their cooperation. And as I started looking at the 20 reels or so that they had sent me, it was the same footage over and over again. There's actually very little footage of astronauts on the surface of the moon during the first mission. In fact, there's probably 15 pictures of fewer of astronauts on the surface of the moon from the first mission. And believe it or not, there's not a single picture of Neil Armstrong on the surface of the moon. The
Right. Okay.
most famous man in history, on the most famous moment in history, there's not a single picture of him on the moon. The people at the archives were dumbfounded. Now, their excuse is, well, he was taking the pictures, so he's not in them. But I think, if there's a 500-degree temperature difference between light and shadow and micrometeorites and radiation, you might want to have a backup camera, and you might give each astronaut a camera in case they drop one. And then, of course, you'd have a backup record and you'd have a picture of the first man to walk on the moon. But he didn't even want his picture taken, which is kind of odd. So after going through the first few tapes and seeing the exact same footage over and over again, even though I asked for unedited footage, everything I got was pre-edited with, a kind of a corny voiceover about how great the missions were. And so I pretty much stopped looking at the tapes. And then as I was finishing up the film, I wanted to find the countdown in real time without it being edited from about, T minus a minute to plus a minute. And I had to go through all these reels to find it. Second to the last, I popped in this tape that said, "Do not show to the public." And it's an unedited footage of them faking being halfway to the moon with the third track of audio of the CIA prompting them to create a fake radio delay as if they're farther from the Earth than they really are. All
So
of this,
you can't. Yeah, I mean, you can't really be certain that was the CIA, but that's what you is that what you're
well, I presume
surmising?
that it was because
Yeah.
it's not NASA and it's not the astronauts.
No.
And according to NASA, there's only two people on the channel, NASA and the astronauts, but that's not true. There's a third party that has a completely different radio EQ. It's not like the sound of going through a walkie-talkie. It's crystal clear. It's wherever the tape is being recorded. And they're basically telling the astronauts not to answer NASA's questions immediately because that would give away the fact that they're really close to the Earth. So, excuse me here, I adjust my camera. We had a problem with that a little bit earlier when setting up. But basically, they told them, if you answer NASA right away, you're going to give away the fact that you're close to the Earth. So count off
And
4 seconds.
that little bit, sorry, I just want to get this in
Mhm.
because that little bit, you in the book, you at least one time anyway, you reference your website and videos on your website, and that's video number 4 on your website. In it, that particular piece that you're talking about, if anybody wants to go to your website, Sibrel.com, obviously after we've finished here, Sibrel.com, and it's video number 4 that you're actually talking about. It's quite famous in the movie. You probably remember it if you've seen the movie. That's the one we're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's what convinced me that the moon missions were fake. I mean, it's 100% crystal clear that they're still in Earth orbit 2 and 3 days into the flight. When they're claiming to be halfway to the moon, it's very clear they have this, alleged Earth floating in space around it. It's a 1 foot model of the Earth from the spacecraft. And then there's the third track of audio prompting them to fake a radio delay to give the impression they're halfway to the moon when they're still in Earth orbit. You can see the very bright earth shine out the window reflecting through the window. And so it proves that they did not leave Earth orbit on the first mission to the moon. And seeing how they all had identical equipment, if the first mission's equipment cannot leave Earth orbit, as the tape proves, that means they never left Earth orbit. And what a surprise, 50 years later, they still cannot leave Earth orbit. You can prove it just by deductive reasoning. Today, with 50 years better technology, NASA can only send astronauts 1,000th the distance to the moon. So they're claiming 50 years ago, with all of NASA having 1 millionth the computing power of a cell phone, they sent astronauts 1,000 times farther than they can today with 5 decades better technology. So seeing how it's impossible for technology to go backwards, it means they faked it. Because after Lindbergh flew across the Atlantic in 1927, just 10 years later, there were thousands of aircraft flying across the Atlantic, 100 times more complicated. And when they blew up the atomic bomb in 1945, just 10 years later, atomic bombs were 1,000 times more powerful. So if they could go to the moon on the first attempt with 1 millionth the computing power of a cell phone, they would have been on Mars 10 years later. They'd be in another solar system by now, and there'd be bases all over the moon. There's bases at the South Pole, even though it's 100-mile-per-hour winds and 100 degrees below zero, because it's humanly possible. If it were humanly possible to go to the moon, there would be bases there. The fact that there are not bases there is proof that it cannot be done.
And they've not been back in a very, very long time, have they?
Well, yeah, I mean, they only
Since
went during like a 2-year
1973,
period.
is it?
Hmm.
1970, which is well, it's nearly 50 years ago, isn't it? We're
Yeah.
getting
And then there's
yeah,
so many inconsistencies. For example, if you really went to the moon, and what it cost in today's dollars is $200 billion. So imagine Bill Gates spending $200 billion to make the first supercomputer. And then when it's done, it works fantastic. He takes the computer, throws it into a furnace with all the diagrams on how he made it. That's what they did to the moon equipment. They destroyed it all. They destroyed the original diagrams. They destroyed the original videotapes. Now, if you really went to the moon and really spent $200 billion to produce this incredible equipment that could so easily fly to the moon 6 times, you would never destroy it. However, if you were perpetrating a fraud, you would destroy it. And so the fact that they destroyed everything is actually proof of the fraud itself.
yeah. Jimmy Hagan said in chat. He said that particular piece of video that we were talking about before, that was for him. That was the nail in the coffin. I think it was for me. I think
Yeah, it
that
was
was
for me
my
too. I mean, it broke my heart when I saw that footage of them faking being halfway to the moon right in front of your eyes with someone prompting them on a secret channel of audio telling them how to do it. I'm like, is this the world that I live in? Is it this far gone? Is it this pathetic that they lied about the greatest accomplishment of mankind? And they did. And so you have to understand 75% of Americans know that Oswald did not kill Kennedy. The dead man's nephew, Bobby Kennedy Jr., Robert Kennedy Jr., says the CIA did it. That's my conclusion exactly. It's crystal clear. The CIA killed Kennedy. Then you have John McNamara, former defense secretary, admitting that the Gulf of Tonkin incident, which led to the Vietnam War, which led to 1 million people dying, they just made that up. It never actually happened. Then you have 3,000 architects and engineers who say it's impossible for a pinhole airplane going through a steel structure grid to cause its collapse. And now we have photographic evidence of the moon landing fraud. And we have an eyewitness. This is disclosed in the book Moon Man, which you can get at Sibrel.com. We have an eyewitness who was there standing beside President Johnson on June 1st, 1968, when they filmed Apollo 11 a year in advance at a secretive military base where this eyewitness was chief of security. All this is in the book. In addition, I go into events that I've never disclosed before that happened to me during the investigation of the film, including at one point being kidnapped and drugged with truth serum by the CIA. I escaped their custody. I peed in a cup. I gave it to a friend to take to a lab in my friend's name. A couple of days later, he calls me up and said there was a problem. I'm like, well, what problem? He says, well, there was a break-in at the lab. I'm like, and? He says, well, funny thing, the only thing stolen was your urine sample, because I was just about to prove that I had this, exotic truth serum or some, very strange drug that only the government would have in my bloodstream. And they literally sent agents into the lab at night to break in and remove that proof. That's in the book, never spoken of publicly before.
wow. Yeah, I did notice that. I did notice that on the thing. I'm looking forward to getting to that bit of the book when you talk about that. What there is, I wanted to ask you about the astronauts themselves. I mean, we know that Neil Armstrong didn't do very many interviews. I think Buzz Aldrin was the one that did most of the interviews. He was sort of the front man for the Apollo missions. But there was one that you mentioned in the book. Blah blah. Whatever. I've written it down here. I've been making notes today. That's why I've not really got very far. Is it James Irwin? Apollo 15. He was the guy, wasn't he going to come forward and say something?
Yeah, I mean, before I hit the scene, the leading investigator into the moon landing fraud was Bill Casey, a whistleblower at Rocket 9. And he had started doing talk shows. I think he was one of the first guests on the Oprah Winfrey show. And apparently, one of the Apollo astronauts, James Irwin, saw him on that show and actually contacted him. So you imagine my surprise if I say, let me get this call, and it's one of the astronauts calling me. So that happened to Bill Casey. One of the astronauts called him up and said, I need to talk to you privately about these accusations in your book. His book was called We Never Went to the Moon. Mine is Moonman at Sibrel.com. And he said that the reason that he had called this whistleblower to basically have a private conversation about the moon landings was because he had become a born-again Christian and wanted to confess something, confess sin. So he said he's concerned for his safety. Please call him back at this number 3 days later. 3 days later, the astronaut was dead from a heart attack. So obviously, one or both parties' phone calls were being monitored. The CIA did not want a confession from an eyewitness, and they killed him beforehand. In fact, my eyewitness only confessed because he was dying of cancer. And when I confirmed all these details with his surviving relative just, a year and a half ago while I was editing the book Moon Man, he was visited by people from the CIA, and his life was threatened if he ever talked about it ever again. And this was just a year and a half ago. So I had to contact the White House press secretary, the United States senator on the Intelligence Committee, and the FBI in the region where this relative lived to get them protection. It would be embarrassing. I mean, even though the moon landing fraud killed fewer people probably than any other government fraud, I mean, there were 200 eyewitnesses who died in the Kennedy assassination, 3,000 on 9/11, a million from the Gulf of Tonkin lie. Maybe 15 people died covering up or whistleblowers in the moon landing fraud. Nevertheless, if the truth came out, Jason, I think it would shock the public more than any other revelation, because they cried for these people, they prayed for them, they waved their flags, they gave them medals of honor for lying. And then the second to the last chapter in the book reveals kind of the Achilles tendon of really why the government is so afraid for the truth about the moon landing to come out. Because according to an astronaut's widow and surviving son, their father and husband was going to be the first man to walk on the moon. And because of his criticism of NASA, according to them, not my opinion, he was murdered by the CIA. So if the truth comes out that the moon landing was fraudulent, the very next investigation they're going to open up is the death of Gus Grissom, Roger White, and Ed Chaffee, who were going to be the first crew to walk on the moon, whose family members are 100% convinced that he was killed by the CIA. Because what this means is this $200 billion in today's dollars that the government got, the federal government's getting about a third of everyone's labor. And they're using it to deceive them and to murder their own countrymen who are trying to expose their crimes, because the materials used to commit these homicides were paid for by the taxpayers. So we're actually paying for people to deceive us and paying for people to kill our countrymen who are trying to expose their crimes. Now, I think that's not a very good state for the country to be in when William Benny, who works for the NSA for 30 years, admits he eyewitnessed Supreme Court justices' cell phones being monitored for the purpose of blackmailing them into voting a particular way. He goes on national news. It's an established fact that no one contradicts, and there's not a single investigation because all the heads of those departments are following corrupt leaders above them, and they're not going to expose their own crimes. This is a sad and pathetic state of our country.
It is. And unpicking it is a real job. But fortunately, there's people like yourself around that are going to do it. Jimmy Hagan's asked a question. He said, Jason, ask Bart about Stanley Kubrick as alleged admission to faking the moon landing shots. I think that was the story in a nutshell. What do you think about the position with Stanley Kubrick? Was he involved at all?
Well, first of all, we know the missions were falsified, which means they had to have somebody in charge of making the pictures and television images look real. So they had basically two choices. They could hire the general of the media department of the Pentagon and have great security but amateur results, or they could hire the best filmmaker on the planet, get a short-term benefit of good results, and worry about security later. That's the choice I would have made, and what a coincidence. We had a film about going to the moon made the very same year that they faked the first moon mission, 1968. Mind you, it was faked a year in advance. And that man was Stanley Kubrick, who was seen on NASA's grounds talking to the flight director and various people there. Now, there's a fake film out there where Kubrick allegedly confesses, to the faking of the moon landing. That is a forgery. For one, Kubrick died in 1999, and they refer to me being punched by Buzz Aldrin, which happened in 2002. So it is so truthful that Kubrick did in fact fake the moon landings that they make a fake film about it to come out as not being genuine in order to discredit the reality that he did indeed fake it. You see how clever the CIA is. Now, it's a side note. It doesn't really matter who faked it because the main thing is that they were faked. And that's who I would have chosen to do it. And then most people don't realize the second time they went to the moon, a few months later, they accidentally, in quotes, pointed the TV camera at the sun. So in the first minute of the mission, so they didn't have any TV images. Then the next mission didn't go to the moon. And so they actually had 2 years after Kubrick faked the first one to get their act together and to figure out how they faked the second one. It's David Percy's opinion of Alice.com that the other missions were shot primarily in United Kingdom. And I think he's correct. I think the first one was shot here because we have an eyewitness of what United States military base that was. However, there is photographic evidence that later missions were shot in the United Kingdom in a former blimp hangar. It's pretty conclusive proof.
But any idea where that is? Because we're in the I'm in the UK.
I wish I remembered the name of it, but it's an old World War II or post World War II dirigible hangar, and you can see a certain kind of design of the I guess the supports in the ceiling that accidentally show up in a large landscape of some of the Apollo pictures. And it's a side note. These are minor curiosities compared to the fact that the moon missions were fake. That's the big picture that people have to see. They did fake the moon landing. They did do 9/11. They did kill Kennedy, and they're doing the little, event that's been going on for 2 years. These people are at large. They're entrenched. They're getting more powerful and more experts at deceiving and murdering the public. So unless you want to live that way forever, then somebody better rise up and do something about it.
Yeah, I think we all need to do that, don't we? We all need to do that. I mean, the Ukraine thing as well is also the same sort of thing. Um, it's theatre for us, really. And I know they're doing these things and people are dying and it's costing money and everything. But to me, it appears like it's a great big movie that's being moved about. And even this part that we're doing now, the parts that we're playing is part of that movie. Now, obviously, they don't have control over this part of that movie, but they have control over the big bits. Now, Jimmy again also asked. He said, did you hear any whispers about 3 Russian cosmonauts who allegedly died attempting to get to the moon back in the early days? And I like to add to that as well. Have you ever heard the conspiracy theory, the theory, shall we say, that the first man in space was actually Vladimir Ilyushin, and that was covered up by the Soviet Union at that time? The two questions there, both Russian in origin.
Yeah, I believe there is evidence to conclude that at least one crew from the Soviet Union did die, and they covered it up. And as far as the first person being someone other than Gagarin, I don't know about that. The Soviets at that time had more control over the media than the U.S. did over there, maybe slightly, because of at the time Kennedy was a fairly open, honest president comparatively to others. So it was a little bit different in the Soviet Union. They could cover things up a little bit easier than they could here. Although they never did fake the moon missions, did they? That only we did that. And so, it's so pathetic. Everything that the U.S. government says is pretty much the opposite of the truth lately. They claim to be, the light on the hill, the democracy for the world. And yet when any honorable person rises in either party, Bernie Sanders on one end or Ron Paul on the other, they're squashed. So they control both parties. So the idea that it's red versus blue is a complete illusion, so that people don't discover the true criminals and go after them to unified. So.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, the story I heard. Well, I actually watched a film. I can't remember what it was called. I think it was something called the Great Cosmonaut Conspiracy. But it was Vladimir Ilyushin. You've heard of Ilyushin aircraft. Where he was from that family, and he was a ace jet pilot. And the story is that he did one revolution, but the problem was he crash landed in China. And he made his recovery in China. And at that time, China and Russia weren't on the best of terms. And so, there was a bit of a diplomatic incident. So it was all hushed up. But interesting to look at if you're, from your point of view, maybe another book in there. What about you've met astronauts, haven't you? What gives you the idea for the Astronauts Gone Wild? I mean, how did that come about?
Well,
Was it?
the first film, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon, which you can see at Sibrel.com. Like I said, the book Moon Man, which just came out, will reveal all these things I've never discussed before, and they're not in the films, but it's interactive. You read a chapter and it says stop, go to video link number 1 at Sibrel.com, and there's basically 15 links. Astronauts Gone Wild, to kind of do the same thing. It's about chapter 3 or 4. And I say, look, I'm about to talk about this. Why don't you stop, go watch that film first so you know what I'm talking about. Basically, after the first film was produced, which proves that we didn't go to the moon, I thought, I guess because of watching TV shows where people swear on the Bible in court, I thought, well, why not just track down some of these people and ask them to swear on the Bible whether they walked on the moon or not. It was during that course of production that one astronaut threatened to hit me, one astronaut threatened to shoot me, one astronaut kicked me, one astronaut punched me, and another astronaut, we accidentally left the microphone on him, wireless, in his home with the door closed, and our camera in the back of the rental car still recording the private audio. We hear him discussing whether or not to call the CIA to have me assassinated, which of course would not be necessary if they really went to the moon, would it? So it's an odd kind of film. The first film, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon, is more poetic and in a general sense a better film. The Astronauts Gone Wild, it's a little bit rough around the edges, and we basically just show one confrontation with an astronaut after another. Now, for me, the window shot of them faking being halfway to the moon is what proves that they didn't go to the moon in the first film. But about 1 out of 5 people say what's convincing in the first film is just the roughly 10 to 15 seconds I showed of them at the first press conference after they allegedly walked on the moon. And instead of looking like victors in the Super Bowl, locker room, they look like they're at the funeral of their mother for a whole hour. And they're just look like it kills them to have to sit there and lie about the greatest accomplishment of mankind. And so you see in Astronauts Gone Wild these reactions that really are out of place for people who walked on the moon, but exactly the way people would react if they got caught faking walking on the moon. For example, if I walked on the moon and someone thought otherwise, I would find that hysterically funny. Like, really? You think it's in a TV studio? Oh, you want me to swear on 2 Bibles? I'll do that. But the way Buzz Aldrin reacted is like me walking up to him in front of his wife and saying, oh, your mistress, she says hello. And he really does have a mistress, so he gets angry. The anger came about by exposing him in front of his entourage and the world. Because if he really walked on the moon, why would anyone be mad for throwing a feather at them and saying, hey, they really didn't do it? Who cares?
Yeah, it was a difficult watch for me. I think that was more difficult. I mean, a funny thing happened is a really easy watch, and once you get going, it's only I'm sure it used to be longer. There's been some cut out of it?
Well, yeah, originally it was going to be however long it needed to be, and then Fox Television wanted us to cut it down to 47 minutes so that it would be an hour with commercials. I had an interview with Bill Casey in there that I spent a lot of time filming and had to cut it out to make it. And then after I spent all that time re-editing the film, then their lawyers wouldn't let them broadcast it. There have been multiple TV stations, I think 5, that bought the rights to this footage and were so excited to air it and prove to the world we didn't go. And then some authority above them said that you can't air this. In one instance, NASA themselves actually called NBC News and told them, do not air this footage. And in the case of the BBC, it was my understanding that someone from the Pentagon called them after they had paid for it, after it was scheduled, and they refused to broadcast the film. I tell you, Jason, it makes me uncomfortable watching Astronauts Gone Wild. I'm like, oh, it's a little odd to see these guys sweating, turning, beet red when I show them the footage of the fake photography, and they start getting mad, and then defending their actions, all the while they're virtually admitting that I'm correct. Like it's not their fault they faked the moon landings. I'm like, give me a break. No one
I don't
forced
think
you to do it.
I don't think they quite knew what was coming either, because around about that time there were no social media and stuff like that. So they probably thought that him punching you in the face wasn't quite going to have the effect that it did have. I mean, forums. We were on forums back then. I remember that we were on forums, and that's where people shared it, and that I think really gave it a boost. And of course, then social media comes along, and yeah, I know they're trying to cut everything down and trying to cut everything out, but I just don't think it was well thought out at all on Buzz's part.
Well, no, which is interesting. How can the guy, can control himself when safety and death are so close side by side if he were really on the moon, when the guy can't even control himself on Earth? I mean, sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. And he gets so mad that I exposed him that he punches me. I mean, it's, pretty sad that that's the case. And then you have the guilty party being defended by the police. They say, yes, he's guilty of assault, but we're not going to prosecute a national hero. And if I had punched him, I would have gone to jail. And so the state of our country is that our national heroes are liars. That's who we gave Congressional Medals of Honor to. We gave them medals because they lied so well. How about that? What a country, huh?
Yeah, what a great country. Dinny, who lives in the woods in Germany, he asked, what do you think about the Mars landings? I wanted to get into a reason why do you think they didn't go? Do you think they didn't go because it's impossible, or do you think they didn't go because they thought that it was too little time, so they faked it instead? And now in the meantime, they've realised that it is impossible anyway. What do you think the reasoning is?
Well, one of the reasons they can't go to the moon is, number one, they don't have enough fuel to do it. You'd have to bring fuel up to the space station in multiple trips, probably 50 or more trips, and have basically tanks of fuel up there. And then from there, maybe you could go to the moon. Of course, you'd have to shelter yourself from micrometeorites on the moon, which they never did. And then you'd have to go through the radiation belts. Most people don't know this, but about 1,000 miles above the Earth is a radiation field that's approximately 30,000 miles thick. And the only time humans are said to have gone through it is to the moon and back. And one of the clips in the book that's linked at Sibrel.com is we have NASA admitting that the radiation belts are dangerous and that the technology for an astronaut to go through them and survive has yet to be invented. How about that? So how did they go to the moon? Now, of course, you can X-ray a toaster 1,000 times and it'll still make toast. However, you can't X-ray a human 1,000 times and they're going to die on you. So you could send unmanned probes to the moon, and I believe they've done that. And you could send unmanned probes to Mars, and I believe they've done that. Now, whether those probes are the same ones that they're claiming are there, meaning they could have sent secret probes, there's doubt about that. I mean, we have to remember these people faked the moon landings. So any space mission they do is suspect. The early probes from the 70s that went to Mars, the background looks suspicious to me. It looks identical to a place on Earth in Hawaii. And then the other ones, the most recent ones, some of those look identical to places in northern Greenland. So who knows what they're doing? Basically, gangsters have front businesses. They have like a dry cleaner or whatever, when really they're doing gambling out of it. The government is run by gangsters. So they're doing the same thing. They, claim that they need $100 million for a moon rover, even though it has fewer parts than a Jeep, and they spend maybe $500,000 building and designing the thing and take 99.5 million and spend it on something else. So that's what they're doing. If they send a probe, I mean, why would you spend $1 billion to map the surface of Venus when you know it's a dead rock at 800 degrees? I mean, what's the point? There isn't a point. So what are they doing with that money? You know, and so it's hard to conceal a launch. So they often have to have some reason. They could send up a missile or two or satellite to Jupiter, and it might be in Jupiter's orbit, and they might say it's there to study the atmosphere. But it might also have a secondary secret purpose to triangulate maybe a rogue planet or a comet or asteroid that's heading toward Earth. They're not going to tell us if such an event is going to happen because they want to depopulate us. And this way they can let Mother Nature do it without having to go down in history as the next genocidal Hitler, although they're probably going to outdo him with the recent little event that's been going on for the last 2 years. So what can you do?
Jimmy Hagan says, Jason, ask Bart if he thinks the international political climate of the time puts a lot of pressure on the USA to put forward this lie as a way to misdirect the Russians, which took priority over all else. Now, I think that if it was, well, I think it was anyway, but. If it's been faked, then it's. I think the Russians have got to be in on it anyway. Because they'd know, wouldn't they? Why they'd blow the whistle otherwise?
They're not exactly in on it, but they are making good use of having found out that it was fake. For example, I could have a picture of a world leader with a prostitute. Now I could give that away to the media, ruin that person, and that's that. Or I could blackmail them year after year after year after year. And so that's what the Soviets, the Chinese, Israelis, Japanese, European nations, India, whoever, they're probably blackmailing us because that's a more valuable use of the information if they have figured out or have reconnaissance that proves that the missions were fake, which I suspect at least the Soviet Union and China has that information already. In fact, it's taught in schools in China that the moon missions are fake. So why they don't acknowledge that publicly, probably there's some deal worked out between the two. I know for a fact that the CIA loves the government of China. I know for a fact that NASA is sending very sophisticated technology to the Chinese government. So the idea that China is some enemy of America is not really true. They may be a competitor, but so is people when you're lining up in a track race in the Olympics. You may have 2 or 3 Americans in the same race. They're not your enemy, they're your competitor. And so the CIA, wishes they could have even more dictatorial powers than they already do, like China does, and they're selling them technology all the time. This idea that Russia's our enemy or China's our enemy or whatever the boogeyman is, most of that is manufactured so that they can keep the military industrial complex fed. For all we know, the whole war going on in Ukraine is being mutually staged by, former KGB Putin and people within the administration who are, former CIA or active CIA. The whole thing, I'm not saying the war is fake, but I'm saying that both parties could have known about it in advance, say, okay, well, if you do this, then we can do this. And if you do that, we can do this. And then we'll have an excuse for food shortages and martial law. And that would be great. But of course, we have to act like, we dislike you. That's probably what's going on.
Yeah, that's what I think anyway. I think that we are being lied to on all counts about everything. Tony has said, can you ask Bart, do you know the reason why Aldrin went to the South Pole?
Well, most people don't know this, but there's a telescope there, and it's an infrared telescope. Now, it's either there's 2 potential reasons why it's there. I basically have been studying this event that's been going on for the last 2 years, and my conclusions are simply the conclusions of experts who I have watched interviews with or interviewed myself. And the conclusion is that the event over the last 2 years is manufactured. The purpose of that is to trick people into taking a particular medicine. The purpose of that is to achieve the goal of Bill Gates of having less people around. And then the next question is, well, why are they doing that? And why are they in such a hurry to do that? I was told in 1989 by a senior manager at NASA that, yes, indeed, the moon landings are fake, but I should do a film about something else. And I'm like, oh, tell me. He says Planet X. And I'm like, oh, well, what's that? He says Planet X is a rogue planet that orbits around the sun every 360 years or so, and it's going to come back again in the first part of the 21st century, which at the time was 30 or more years into the future. And I'm like, well, whatever. Now, most people think that Planet X, if it's real, is coming from the southern hemisphere. That's either true, or the telescope there is simply diversion to misdirect people's attention. But there is a powerful telescope at the South Pole. It's infrared, and if a rogue planet exists, it cannot be seen by an optical telescope. It has to be seen by an infrared telescope. So it could be to track such an object, because Janet Napolitano, the day she resigned, had a warning kind of similar in nature to Eisenhower's warning. Eisenhower was president for 8 years, and he was so terrified of the deep state, he only warned the American public about it his last day in office of 8 years. So Janet Napolitano, the day she resigned as Homeland Security Director, said something very interesting. She said a natural disaster is on its way, the likes of which the United States has never before seen. Now, there's actually 3 clues there. What is coming is a natural disaster. What is coming is a natural disaster that has never happened in the history of America. What is coming is a natural disaster that you could predict years in advance. The only natural disaster that I know of that you could predict year in advance is something coming from outer space because of the mathematical calculations of geometry. You could calculate probably to the day and close to the minute when a comet, asteroid, or rogue planet would come near or hit the Earth. So perhaps Buzz Aldrin, being in on the water cooler talk of what's really going on in the world as the man who faked the moon mission, maybe he went there to keep an eye on a comet, asteroid, planet X, or whatever. It's my understanding that his comment was what he saw there, I believe through the telescope, gave him great horror. And so it's my opinion that the reason why Bill Gates is so earnest to lower the population is because a cosmic event is coming that, when it does come, could kill half the people on the earth in 90 days to 6 months. And so rather than have all that shock happen at once, the world leaders have done this little scenario for the past 2 years to get people to take this particular medicine, which in my opinion will gradually lower the population so that it won't be all of a sudden a shock for the same number of people to die at once. Rather, they will have spread it over 2 years because of the little scenario they've been playing out.
Interesting. Very, very interesting stuff. I mean, there's so many different angles, isn't there, that we could go from with what's been going on, and we can link just about everything. I mean, I didn't know that Buzz Aldrin had been to the South Pole. I didn't know the significance of that, but wow. Chris Partridge says, there was somebody asked in here, a question that I wanted, and Tony did ask this question before you even arrived, but he said, I wonder if Bart was the last guy Buzz ever punched. And the question for Bart, did any of the astronauts ever swear on the Bible? I think we've already answered that, haven't we? That's no.
Well, not exactly. The ones that did swear on the Bible were the ones who acknowledged that they were atheists. I think Buzz Aldrin did punch one other person. It was his mother. I think she owed him $5, and she was holding on to it. He got kind of mad at her. But aside from that, I don't think he's punched anybody that I know of. But anyway.
Oh, you could be the final one. And Chris Partridge said he wanted me to ask you if if you think there's a secret space program that they're not telling us about.
Well, yes and no. It's not advanced enough to where they can walk on the moon or walk on Mars. It's not that advanced. Certain technologies have kind of been, stifled to a certain degree. For example, jet engines, commercial ones, have been around for almost 60 years. But how many of them go faster than the sound barrier? None of them. And so because of the radiation belt, because of the amount of fuel necessary to leave Earth orbit, it's just not a practical thing to do. It could be done, but it's not being done. Now, I do believe that there's a second space station out there. For example, when the space station was first built, it was built by multiple trips of the space shuttle. They did something like 135, 40 launches in a very short period of time, I think, pushing safety repeatedly. They were in a hurry to build something. Now, they claimed that even though the space station is 250 miles above the Earth, that for some reason it takes them 3 days to get there and to synchronize with it. Well, a few years ago, the Soviets launched a rocket to mate with the space station, and it took like 12 hours. Okay. And then they're like, oh, how come the US takes 3 days to go from Earth to the space station and the USSR takes 12 hours? You know, they don't go straight up because the speed would be off. They have to kind of loop around and synchronize the speed. So why did one take 1/6 of the time? And the answer was in the media, well, the Russians have better math than we do. Apparently 2 + 2 = 4 in the Soviet Union, and here naturally it equals 17. So, you know, which it does over here. And so what were they doing for the 3 days? They're working on another space station. Now, what's the purpose of that? I believe that if a rogue planet exists, that it's heading toward the Earth, and if you understand that gravity is not a force, rather a curve in space, that it will push a gravity wave ahead of itself, which will ripple through the asteroid belt, which will cause, if Planet X is real and approaching Earth, multiple asteroids to be thrown out of their orbit in a random way. And at that time, if Planet X is due, whenever that is, we will have multiple asteroids coming toward Earth with very short notice. So I believe that the second space station is probably some sort of weaponized platform to shoot these asteroids as they come near the Earth when Planet X approaches.
Chris Partridge says he was thinking a secret method of propulsion that doesn't rely on rockets. Maybe that's true. Taylor, who's a fellow American, is over there in Washington State. He wants to know what do you feel about your debunkers, because you're going to have people. I just had a look just before on the Amazon on the book reviews, your reviews from your website. I've had a look, and you know the general, well, the overwhelmingly positive, but there are one or two people in there, and you always get that. How do you deal with those, and do you get many?
Well, I don't do anything. It's pointless. You know, I don't even watch. There's a filmmaker out there who did like a 3.5-hour movie, proving probably better than I did that the moon landings are fake. And I haven't even seen that one. You know why? Because I already know the moon landings are fake. I'm not going to watch a 3.5-hour movie that's going to prove to me that 2 + 2 = 4. The most valuable asset I have is time. And no offense, I already know that the moon missions were fake. And I'm not going to argue with people who are so close-minded. I talked to a professor at a major aerospace university who said there's nothing I could say that would convince him that the moon missions were fake because it's become a god to him. Then I said, well, what if you saw Neil Armstrong confess tearfully on TV that it was fake? He said, I'd still think we went. The fact is, if they really went to the moon, then anyone who says otherwise is an idiot. So why are there hundreds of YouTube videos that took thousands upon thousands of hours to produce to convince a bunch of morons of the obviousness of the moon landings? Thou does protest too much. The simple fact is you can prove from one photograph in the book Moon Man, which you can see at Sibrel.com, of two shadows from objects 5 feet apart intersecting at 90 degrees when in sunlight they would be parallel forever. That proves we didn't go. We have a 1-foot model being constructed right in front of your eyes of a fake Earth floating in space. That proves it. And then we have the simple logic that today, with all the technological advancements that we have, NASA can only send astronauts 1,000th the distance to the moon. So what they're claiming is that when they had 1/1,000,000th the computing power of a cell phone, they sent astronauts 1,000 times farther 50 years ago than they can today. which means they had greater technology, 1,000 times greater technology in 1969 than they do today, which is completely illogical. There's never been a milestone, a scientific achievement in the history of the world that 50 years later it wasn't vastly improved, much less could not be replicated, except the moon landings, because they never happened. People need to give it up. It didn't happen. And the book proves it in 101 ways that they didn't go to the moon. Now, I'm sure Hitler's children, if he had any, would defend dear old dad, no matter what we said about all the atrocities he did. No, he didn't do it, whatever. People are going to believe what they're going to believe, and these people simply do not have an open mind. They have made a god out of the moon landing. And if they can show me one time in the history of the world in which a technological breakthrough, like breaking the sound barrier, imagine breaking the sound barrier. Chuck Yeager did that, I think, in like 1954. And then within a few months, people in the Soviet Union and in China were breaking the sound barrier. And then Mach 2, Mach 3, Mach 4, Mach 5, atomic bombs, were 1,000 times more powerful 10 years later. If they can show me a technological breakthrough that 50 years after the fact, that it was less technologically advanced than when it was first achieved, then I'll admit the moon landings are real. But you can't do that because there's not one instance in the history of the world. In fact, there's never been a flying machine that got off the ground on the first attempt. Even a biplane by the Wright brothers, it took multiple tries to get off the ground. The 747, after millions of aircraft had been built with 10 years of better technology than the Apollo rocket, they could not get that fuselage off the ground after 168 attempts. It wouldn't get off the ground. They couldn't find an engine that could lift it off the ground. So not only has there never been a flying machine that worked on the first attempt, you have the moon landing being the most complicated flying mission ever achieved, and it was done on the first attempt. Double illogical. You have Elon Musk in the 21st century. It took him 6 attempts to land a rocket vertically without it exploding. And that's with 6 supercomputers completely surrounding it, gimbaling the thing so that it could land. It crashed the first 5 times. And yet, with 1/1,000th the computing power, 50 years earlier, they landed that thing vertically every single time they tried. Really? I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, that's unbelievable to me. Last question that somebody put in the question, because I know we booked you for an hour. We've got about 2 minutes left. But what did you think about Capricorn 1, the film? Somebody said, is that a plausible way?
It's a brilliant film. Even if they went to the moon, it's a brilliant film. Basically, Bill Casey, who was my mentor, he wrote a book called We Never Went to the Moon. Then I think it was Peter Hyams made a film about it. And yet, to not offend people, they said it was about a fake Mars mission. Everyone knew exactly what they were talking about. And life imitates art to such a degree. The leading actor, the Tom Hanks of the day, was Elliot Gould. And he played an NBC reporter who was fired for working on the story. I was an NBC reporter who was fired for working on the story. My car in the scene in the film, someone jerry rigs his cruise control or something to where the accelerator pedal goes down and he takes off and he can't stop. Someone did that to my car as well. It's uncanny. And that has a happy ending, that the truth comes out. I hope this little episode has a happy ending too, and the truth comes out. So watch A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon at Sibrel.com. Capricorn 1's a beautiful, magnificent film. Excellent soundtrack, my favorite, from Jerry Goldsmith. And it really, shows you how quite plausible this was. In fact, it's pretty easy to fake. There's no independent press coverage. There's no one verifying. How can we know? There's 3 government employees and a TV picture from the Nixon administration. Trust us. It's actually very easy to have faked the moon missions.
Very, very easy. Thank you very much. Moon Man is the book. It's available at Sibrel.com. And also, if you haven't seen it, you've got to see A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. Honestly, it's one of those moments. It's a part of, in fact, it's in 2 ways. It got me thinking about the moon landings, and it also got me away from listening to Alex Jones. I mean, this is a long time ago, but I remember Alex Jones had got Buzz Aldrin on and just didn't ask him any questions about, you know, the moon landings at all. And I just thought, well, that's it. I'm not listening to Alex Jones anymore, because that's the first question I would have asked. I would have said, how come you know, I would have asked him about the moon landings, but Alex Jones obviously just wanted the ratings and that sort of thing. But Bart, it's been fantastic. Thank you very much for joining us here on Raconteurs News Over the Pond. It's been absolutely brilliant. Any last words? Anything you want to tell our people? Where to see your books and films and
all the films are available for free at Sibrel.com. In the top left button it says Moonman Video Links. And the main, part of the book, third of it is how and why we didn't go. A third of it is kind of my weird espionage adventures producing it. And the other third is about, a wake-up call. This is the government of our country and pretty much the countries of the world. They're lying to their people, and they're using their own tax dollars to lie to them and to kill anybody who exposes their crimes. This is very serious. Now, if you believe in God, and the Bible is true, it actually kind of implies that the evil people are going to win in this realm until Judgment Day. So, this is kind of a sign that the world is lost, and to save yourself from this corrupt generation by simply repenting and turning to God and waiting for the next life, because this one doesn't look like it's going to turn out too well.
Sucks, doesn't it? Absolutely sucks. But thank you very much. Oh, brilliant. Wednesday, my football team's just scored. Sorry about that. Somebody just said it in chat room. I'm not watching it, I promise you. Well, thank you very much, Bart. I'm going to say goodbye. I'm not going to be able to talk to you off air. I'm sure you've got stuff to go on, because I'm going to carry on for another hour and perhaps get a couple of people phoning in. So thank you very much for coming along. And hopefully we'll speak again. I'll send you an email to thank you as a courtesy, and think of us if you're ever passing this way again.
Sure, just send me a link of the upload.
Okay, I certainly will do. Thanks very much, Bart.
Sure,
there you go,
care, Jason.
There you go. That is Bart Sibrel from Sibrel.com. Remember that place. Remember the Sibrel.com. That's the only place. Well, it's not the only place, but it is the place where you can watch A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. And, of course, Astronauts Gone Wild. And get his book as well. It's called Moon Man. I'm going to stop on perhaps just for another half an hour or so. But I think I'm going to play a record and have a little bit of a break, because my throat's a little bit sore at the moment. So and I need to do the lighting and stuff. So I'm just going to play a record, and I shall be back. Let's see, what should we play? What should we play? It's Rain. It's by Heath, and it's called Rain. It's a lovely song, this. It used to be Andy's favourite. And I always mention Andy when I'm doing this show, as Dinny told me on the show the other day. So enjoy this record. I'll be back in about 5 minutes. 5 minutes and 4 seconds. And we'll continue. I'll take a couple of calls, and we'll see where we go from there. You're on watching Raconteurs News. It's on a Tuesday night. It's absolutely fantastic. Where are we? Oh.
I see clearly now as the rain falls down from mournful clouds that cry so black and grey. You're affecting me ecologically as you chase so long the butterflies away. See the people frown as the rain comes down on lit cigarettes. The raindrops play their games. but I feel unchained every time that it rains. I could never be a prisoner to the sky, but the harder it falls, we get trapped in walls, so by memories of our failures, and it's pouring over me. Looking at you, shivering me, standing here rearranging my dreams. I don't know what fate has in mind for me no more. Rain will fall, I go blind, think I'm losing my mind. The rain kicks you and you're down until you drown. But the harder it falls, we get trapped in walls, so by memories of our failures, and it's pouring over me. I keep falling over me. I can see there's a rainbow shining, showing me the way. I go blind, time has left me so far behind. Now I wonder if I'll ever see the blue sky shining, my heart's crying. As the rain falls down, clouds across the light. You're affecting me ecologically as you chase so long the butterflies away. See the people frown as the rain comes down. All lit cigarettes, the raindrops play their games.
There you go. Oh, there we go. Let me get myself off. There we go. Back on. Good evening. Welcome back to Raconteurs News. That was Heath. That was Rain. It's his original. He's wrote and performed it and done all the music on it and everything. So that's yeah, he's a right talented bastard. He's fucking proper talented. It was called Rain. Yeah. Well, there you go. Brilliant interview there with Bart. I think we're very fortunate to have had Bart in on the show tonight. Very interesting guest, absolutely fantastic. It's one of them though. It makes me nervous. I get really nervous. Oh, hang on a second. Oh, there we go. Oh, he's gone. Oh, jumping on. He said it were a beautiful song. There you go. So Bart Sibrel thinks it was a beautiful song. So thank you for that, Bart. Well, I'll pass that on to Heath. So I'm sure Heath's seen a funny thing happen on the way to the moon. If not, I'll tell him to do it. Anyway, getting back to tonight. So South, good evening. K Kitty 21. Dinny's in there. Let's have a look at who's in the chat room tonight. Kendo Taylor, good evening, Kendo Taylor. He says when they flew to the moon. They should have gone in a Morris Minor. Yeah, Chris Partridge says, "Are these new songs from Heath?" No, they're old ones. These Heath's not he's not done any new songs, not new solo stuff for a while. But yeah, we should. It's he is proper talented. Yeah, all good stuff. Yeah, it is good. Good evening, Ron Malcolm. Good evening to you, Health Freedom UK. Robert there, and anybody who's listening, all the people as well who are listening, but probably not in the chat room. If you're a little bit shy in chat room, they're all good uns in there. They're all good people in the chat room. They'll welcome you. So if you just when you feel up to it, man, it's just let's chill out. Whew. Let's chill out because I'm just like I get nervous, especially when I'm interviewing somebody and I've never interviewed them before, and you don't know what to expect. But absolutely fantastic. It was easy to chat to, and I have read a couple of his chapters of his book. I'm going to be definitely getting into that a little bit later on, and probably tomorrow. I'll have it done by tomorrow, by the weekend anyway. It depends on how busy I get. Miss Blue Sky says, hello, Jason and Raccoonios. Good evening. And somebody asked about AD as well. AD News. I've been with him again today, took him shopping, just done the old news, new stuff, old stuff. Just about the funniest. Oh, here we go. Hang on. We've got Super Leads phoning me. Hang on. Good evening, Super Leads.
Good evening, my friend.
How are you?
How are you?
I'm okay. Can people hear you in the chat room? I wonder. I'm just asking chat room if anyone can hear us.
I'm a minute behind for some reason.
Oh yeah.
I'll just put you down because I'm wheeling. All right.
All right then, no problem. He's putting me down while he's wheeling about. He's yeah, you can, right? As long as people can hear him, that's good stuff. Yeah, good. It was a good interview. I really enjoyed it. Let me stick the thing in the chat room as well. If anybody wants to pop on, I'm gonna do till 2 hours anyway because it's 2 hours Tuesday, isn't it?
Oh, sorry.
Go on.
Sorry, I just said sorry about that.
That's no problem. No problem, mate. No problem. How's it going anyway? What have you just listened to that interview? What did you think?
Yeah. Well, I've heard him before. I thought it was funny as fuck when he got punched by Buzz. But it did kind of stalk him a bit, don't you think?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it was difficult to watch, weren't it?
Yeah.
They were difficult to watch.
Don't get me wrong. Buzz Aldrin's a wanker, but
well, he's fucking dead, isn't he?
And then it kind of lost his rag with him, and just punched him.
Yeah, I think that's what it were. Hang on. Cancel. Oh, fuck. Bollocks. I'll ring him back. Hang on. Fucking put it down because I'm trying to get it so that I'm holding it on mic here like that, but underneath so you can't see it on thing. But I'll get him back on. Armstrong's not alive either. Baldwin's dead and Armstrong's dead. Yo, evening, mate. Sorry about that. It were me. I'm holding this phone up to microphone because I've got this.
Oh no, I ain't got my laptop. You see, because I didn't know you'd be. I thought you'd be on for like 2 hours. So.
No, he agreed to do an hour, so it were interesting. It took what I wanted. Go on, mate.
I just thought I'd ring in and give you some company. No, I know. I've watched him before, and yeah, I thought I did stalk him a bit, but yeah, I probably agrees with. Well, no, not everything he says.
Well, no, but you can't agree with everybody. Everything everybody says, can you? Uni's here anyway. Uni, how you doing?
Fine. How about you?
I'm good. Can you hear Uni, Leeds?
Yeah.
There
Hey,
you
how's
go.
it going, Leeds?
Just if you speak up, you wouldn't.
Yeah. How's it going, Leeds?
All right, mate. How are you?
Going all right. Just same old, same old.
Have you been to the moon?
I mean, I don't know. Is the moon made of cookies? Because if it has, then I probably have been there.
But
I won't be there.
Miss
You
Blue,
won't be there anymore, would it?
not after Uni had been, because he'd fucking knock it off its gravity, wouldn't he? Miss Blue Sky said you did great, Jason, with the Bart interview. By the way, it's always hard to try to talk to someone for the first time, let alone interview them. The thing is, it was my first time that that I spoke to him. I mean, he came on literally 30 seconds to go, so I didn't really get any time to talk to him beforehand. But I think we did okay anyway. But thanks for that, Miss Blue Sky.
I enjoyed it. I thought you did well.
Now you know how I feel, Jason. Whenever I get to talk to a guest, because it's always my first time talking to him.
I'm having to open mic. I'm having to open phone and keep going over from from here, from speaker up to the old up to fucking microphone. I've got this mic here, Anna. Go on, carry on anyway. Jimmy's here. Good evening, Jimmy Hagan's here. Good evening, Jimmy.
Giggity, giggity.
Giggity, giggity, giggity. By the way, Leeds, Paula says hello and sends big hugs and said it was lovely to hear you the other night.
Thank you, Paula. Lovely to hear from you.
There you go. What do you think, Jim?
Audio okay, is it?
Yeah, do we just going up a little bit?
Up a little bit. Oh yeah,
Yeah,
we can do that.
Just
I
a
think we can do
slight
that.
bit.
Is that a bit better? Is it?
That's a bit better, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That was fucking amazing, Jason. I'll tell you what. Do you know how long I've waited to get a second confirmation? That second question that you asked for me about the 3 Russian cosmonauts that allegedly died trying to get to the fucking moon. I first heard that about 20 years ago. And I regularly do little searches for it. And from time to time, just to see if anything pops up on the internet, and I've never, ever had a second confirmation of it. So tonight, that was the first time I ever got a second confirmation on a story from 20 years ago. That was fucking brilliant, man. Excellent. Good catch. Good catch.
Excellent.
Man.
Oh, at least we're able to clear some up for you. Really interesting stuff. His website is full of interesting stuff, and I know I weren't blowing smoke up his arse. The book, I read the first couple of chapters, and what I was going to do is I was going to skip, because I pretty much knew the stuff that was in there, because I'd seen the film in the early part. I'd seen the film, so I was going to skip past some of the stuff where he laid out the evidence and stuff. But I got stuck into it, so I've done a couple of chapters. It's well worth a look. He sent it to me on as an ebook. So I'd really say I weren't blowing smoke up his arse.
Yeah. Some people reckon I'm in the fucking bathroom. It could be, you wouldn't know. I've turned. I'm fucking around with the reverb settings, so.
It seems all right at the moment.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's cool. That's cool. But that second confirmation. Do you know what? That's gold dust to me. Somebody who does. Somebody who kind of like follows the journalistic method, and because the tendency these days is you come across a story and most people will just click and share without checking and double checking to see that there's verifications of it online, so just that's gold dust to me, that little fucking confirmation there that somebody else was able to competently talk about it, you know.
You should weigh it in then. Weigh that gold dust in.
Mm.
What did you think, Uni?
I didn't get to actually watch most of the interview because I was doing something, but I do plan to watch it back after the broadcast is over. But when it comes to the moon landing, I'm very mixed on that particular subject. What I would personally like to see, and I'm sure that and I'm sure that probably wouldn't happen because the people involved wouldn't be interested in it. But what I like to see is like a nice debate between someone like Sibrel and someone like that's like a quote unquote expert, at the on the opposite end view, if you know what I mean. Like a proper debate, being able to go back and forth. Obviously, not a childish freaking cursing back and forth or anything like that. A proper sit down where they where maybe you have like a third person, like a judge, like asking questions or something like that to both parties and they answer, and that kind of thing. I feel like that would be a lot more substantial when it comes to proving the either side of the argument, whether the moon landing is fake or not. And I feel like Sibrel's a cool guy, and I'd like to talk to him myself. It's just that this is just personally what I would like to see, and it's not just with the moon landing either. It's with pretty much any subject, whether it be 9/11 or JFK or anything like that. I like to see debates between parties of different views, where they can sit down and ask proper questions to each other, maybe from a third person who's neutral on the subject.
Those are very rare, though. Yeah, I've tried to do that. We did one on here years ago. Do you remember it, Leeds? That Saturday afternoon?
Which one?
The one between Chrissy Morris and that mate that used to be his mate, Aidan Lee or something. I did it on a Saturday afternoon.
Oh, yeah.
They were having a row on Facebook and it were going everywhere. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll put a show together and you can have a row. We can discuss it, like we'd say who's right and who's wrong. And it was just a fucking nightmare. It was.
See, that's the thing, though. You have to. I understand that something like that is very difficult because again, both parties have to be calm.
But they don't, though. You never get both parties. Somebody always wants something, and the other wants something else. And it ended up. So I got one of them on, and the other one was live streaming it on Facebook, and then making his arguments to what we were saying on our show. It was fucking bizarre, and we got we got like 100 people in chat room an hour before we'd even fucking started. It was fucking mental.
Yeah, so I understand that can be very difficult. It's probably why both parties involved probably wouldn't. That's probably why I don't see something like that very often. It's just personally what I would like to see, and I also understand how difficult it can be. Aside from what you just said, you also like if you have a third person who's neutral on the subject, they have to be informed on both sides of the argument, and you also like both parties involved should also be at least somewhat aware of what the other thinks, so that way that they can sit down and just be like, okay, so I'm feeling I know what points you're going to make, so I have my counterpoints ready, and here's my evidence that backs them up, etc. And it's just like. I don't know. It's just something that I would personally like to see for a lot more of these very divisive subjects, whether it be the moon landing or JFK or 9/11 or anything like that, or Sandy Hook, anything. To me, that would probably be the ideal way to be able to prove once and for all. Or maybe not once and for all, because obviously a courtroom is necessary for that. But it's kind of like a jury. In a courtroom where you pretty much have to where it's kind of like that. You have the juror and then you have both sides that present their evidence. And,
we all know that doesn't end in every single time in a verdict that's real, does it? I mean, it's
no.
Whoever's arguing, who's best at arguing. That's essentially what it is.
That is true. That is a factor of it as well. That's why it can be very difficult. So I guess I understand why it doesn't happen more often. It's just I don't know. It's just something that I would personally like to see. Because I feel like I would really want to sit down and watch a debate between Sibrel and say I don't know anyone who's like
Buzz Aldrin.
Buzz Aldrin. By the way, he's still alive.
He's not. He's dead.
You sure? Pretty sure he's still alive.
Buzz Aldrin's dead, isn't he?
I mean, let me look this up to make sure.
People are saying, have you been on Whiz Uni? Because you're going really fast. Jimmy Hagan's a DJ and Leeds is on phone. It's fucking we're a right bunch, aren't we? I'm sat here in my pushchair.
Well, I was trying to chat with
No, he's
Juni
still
about
alive.
this the other night, right? And about his this hyper thing that he gets on the phone lines, and it's really distracting, and it gets very fucking hard. I was trying to tell him, slow the fuck down, will you?
Yeah,
Fuck's
sorry,
sake.
I'm still working on that.
And turn your fucking camera on. You look more authentic than. Look at that. Look, what do we look at? Japanese fucking porn. That's better.
No, don't go on Jimmy
Get
fucking
up out of
Wheaton.
fucking bed. Well, he's never out of fucking bed, this cunt, right? You know,
He's in
he's
bed, isn't
always
he, all
in
the time?
fucking bed. Jesus Christ. Get up out of bed as well at some stage. So, how are you doing, Uni? That's better, you know? At least you look more authentic when we can see your face.
Yeah.
You know?
You're not looking
People
at my
don't.
avatar.
People generally don't take anime characters very seriously.
Yeah, well, fuck 'em. As Denny says, fuck them. Fuck them.
Mm.
By the
Fuck
way,
him is
where is
right, yeah.
he hasn't popped on?
But it was interesting that he brought up the Planet X thing, you know, because that's been highly on my fucking thoughts this last 2 years. And you know, these lockdowns have been, and all this craziness to go and sort of like to disappear a good portion of the planet. It's a good idea, I think. You know, if you were expecting a kind of something imminent, right? Something deadly on the way in, like that was going to sort of wipe out a huge amount of you'd probably, like a sensible civilization would probably try and do most of the work before the thing arrived, because you'd have a massive big pollution event afterwards, like with bodies lying everywhere and decaying corpses and poison. So, you know, it probably would be a better plan to sort of like wipe out a good proportion of them that probably would die anyway in the event of a natural disaster, you know. So I thought it was very, very interesting he brought up those points, you know. I don't know, that might sound like off the fucking wall, man, but tell your thoughts.
I actually saw the space show that blew up was Challenger.
Challenger, yeah.
Yeah, I saw that on the launch pad. It was actually waiting to go, so I'm not sure whatever that year was. I saw that on the launch pad, and fuck me, those rockets were fucking big. But like that guy said, how much fuel would you need to get to the fucking moon? I mean, it takes me
A lot of fuel.
I have to fill up to get to fucking paper shop.
You have got a mini, though.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. Principium's joined us. Good evening, Principium 2236.
Hey, good evening. How are you doing?
Sorry, go on.
Sorry, mate. Also, the
Wait
people
for Lee.
that never can answer, never mind landings. How do you get propulsion in a vacuum?
Because it forces its way against the propellant itself.
It's just like, what the fuck? And they can never explain that.
They can. They've explained it perfectly. It's the
It don't
propellant
work for
that
me. That
causes
don't work for me. It goes away from it pushes away from the propellant itself.
Yes,
That don't work. If you
They've got no to push against.
it has. It's got the propellant expulsion to propel
the
again
propellant is the propellant, but the propellant
Where's
expulsion.
that coming from? In a
from
vacuum?
the rocket.
What?
Well, I think first off, have we any evidence that space is a vacuum?
No such fucking thing as space, in my opinion.
We'll see. We've gone from they didn't get to the moon to there's no space. I mean, I'm in space, so I know for certain, but I'm not telling you lot.
Jimmy.
I mean, there's yes, brother, yeah.
Yeah, there's no. I agree with you. There's no vacuum. I don't mean that there's air everywhere. but there's certainly no vacuum because it's full of solar particles from every star that's in the sky.
There's water. And there's compounds out there like nitrogen, maybe perhaps not nitrogen. There's chemicals in space. People don't realize that like space is actually full of stuff, you know. And the water that's in space, not exactly, from my understanding, it's not quite the same as the water we have on Earth, but it's still water. A lot of water comes into planet Earth from space, you know. People don't realize this, you know.
We're lied to at school then, aren't we? A vacuum is not what we're told. There's nothing there. Nothing means nothing.
Yeah, vacuum, yeah. A vacuum. You see, the problem I've got is the propulsion has got to be, if it does, how can it can't propel against the propellant, because the propellant has got nothing to propel against. It would just...
It needs something to push against.
It pushes against itself because of the choke on the motor.
But if you haven't got any water, you're fucked.
I guess we're not going to agree on this, are
No,
we?
we're not. I don't think we're going to agree. Let's talk about something else now. Let's talk about...
Cheers.
Yes.
Before we go on, have you seen, I think this is my personal favourite while we're going on about the moon, Apollo 14 moon takeoff. If you haven't seen that, kids, it's funny as fuck.
Apollo 14.
I'm sure it's Apollo 14, and it's right. You'd think it was something that Blue Peter had done.
Leeds, do you think that we've not been into space at all?
No.
What about satellites?
I don't think we can. I think they're in lower Earth orbit. I don't think we can go into space.
So what about satellites then?
Lower Earth orbit.
Yeah, so they're still in atmosphere. Still in atmosphere, yeah. Still in atmosphere.
I guess I'm just going to have to disagree respectfully.
No, it's fine. We can disagree. It's cool. It's cool. It's cool.
Why? What do you think? Sorry, what's your name?
It's Principium.
Sorry?
Principium.
Okay, I'll just call you mate.
Just call him 236.
No, I think. Well, I admit that I can't provide you with any absolute proof, but I do think they have been launched into outer space. I think that the Voyager satellite is now on the way out of the solar system, and I just I disagree with you, pal.
I'll tell you what.
That's fine.
Listen, Leeds, I'm going to show now. I'm going to show on screen. I'm going to show Apollo 14 launch. I've not seen it.
Let me just get the telly. Just let me roll on the telly so I can see it. Have you watched it? It's funny as fucking it.
I haven't seen it. This is what I'm going to say. We're all going to see it together at first time. I hope you haven't all. Let's have a look. It's Chrome tab. That one. Share. There we go. Full screen it. It'll full screen in a minute. There we go. Can you see your telly now then?
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
From the first stage of the Saturn V, we'll begin at 8.9 seconds.
And we'll stay within now for the next minute, 35 seconds to launch.
Still go with Apollo 14. We'll go on internal power in the Saturn V launch vehicle in the count. At ignition and liftoff, we'll have more than 7.5 million pounds of thrust, pushing the space vehicle off the launch pad. This is the heaviest Saturn V space vehicle to be launched thus far.
1 billion pounds of thrust, very phallic.
1 minute, 20 seconds and counting, still go at this time. Third stage.
Fucking 6 minutes. Fuck that. Hang on. Hang on.
Counting, we've now gone on internal
46
power on the
seconds. Shut
internal
up.
batteries of the Saturn V as the count continues. Final maneuver the astronauts
33.
performed before liftoff.
Right, we're at 30.
30 seconds and counting. Stu Russo just said, thanks, it's been a good count.
It's been a good count, he says. It's been a good count.
25
Shush.
seconds and counting, we
Shush.
still go. 20 seconds.
Oh, from
guidance
moon.
alert, the guidance system now going internal.
They don't take off from moon, they take off from Earth.
15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10.
We're going to have to watch this now because I've fucking done all
Ignition
this.
sequence start. 5, 4, 3, 2.
Okay.
1,
You didn't,
0.
Did he? Anybody? He never said
Launch
that, did he?
commit. Liftoff. We have liftoff with Apollo 14. 3 minutes past the hour. The tower is clear.
Right, okay, let me stop sharing. I hope I've still got a fucking...
I'm going to listen back to it tomorrow. And, well, if I didn't, I'll owe you a tenner.
Didn't he? He didn't say take off from moon, did he? Lads, come on, fucking back me up.
I can barely hear him, man. It's like it sounds like he's at the if I'm broadcasting from the toilet, he's halfway down the fucking pipe, man.
Well, that is some old footage from like the freaking 19.
Right,
what year
okay.
is that?
What was wrong with that? I mean, that just showed a rocket launch. I mean, I don't understand.
There were
what
no
you
wrong
think
with that. It went wrong one. Leeds told us wrong one.
Yeah,
From
I think we're
moon.
muddying the waters a little bit because, I think there's no doubt, I know we're all a little bit conspiracy minded, okay, and that's fine, a bit of conspiracy is pretty cool and it's fucking grand for generating chat and alternative ways of looking at things. And the point is, there's no doubt that we can get shit into space. Absolutely no doubt at all about it. The problem is we can't get human flesh through the Van Allen belts, and that's the fucking problem. You see, it's not a problem
agree.
It's not a problem getting stuff into space at all. It's just the problem is the human flesh is just not built to go through the Van Allen belts, and I think that's the key fucking difference. So
I don't think they can get through. I don't think they can get through. I just don't think they can get into space. I just don't. I just don't see how. In a vacuum, you can't propel. The only reason anything propels in this atmosphere is because of air. It propels against the air. A jet propels against the air, not against the propellant, against the air that's there.
So,
if there's no air there, there's no propulsion. If you turn a fan on in a vacuum and put a feather, if there's a feather in and a fucking fan in a vacuum, the fucking fan, you can turn it on, it'll move, but the feather won't go anywhere because it can't. Because there's nothing to propel it. There's no. It's a vacuum.
Yeah, but you said it there, Jason. You said it there, Jason. There's nothing to propel a feather in a vacuum, but the rocket is providing its own propellant, and that's why it moves.
But that propellant is like a raindrop. It would be like propelling against a raindrop, because it's got nothing to propel against, nothing solid there.
Because there's massive raindrops. There's absolutely massive raindrops that it propels against.
Massive. So it gets these big blobs and it propels against the blobs. Anybody buying this? Really, seriously. Honestly, listen, no disrespect or anything, but honestly, are people buying this? Because I'm here to be my mind to be changed. If someone can, but that doesn't make any sense to me. It's like the spinning ball with the where the water flies off it, but we're told we stick to it. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense. Do you understand what I mean?
You have to look into ion drives, Jason. If you take a look at the ion drives that they're using in an awful lot of the
fucking ion drives. What's a fucking ion? When I've fucking good, it's someone tell me really what's an ion? We can prove there's these ions. You know ions exist because you've heard about them before, haven't you? No one's ever fucking seen one though, but they've been told they exist, and then they go, all right, we'll go against these ions. Fuck off, fucking hell! I'm going to fucking laugh. I'm going to get a
It'd
drink.
be a miracle. It would be a miracle if you could see an ion. Yeah, I think, if you could see an ion, it's wow, Superman.
Gone. He's just gone.
Honestly, for this, I think it's probably best if you because there's a whole industry that people work in when it comes to space related subjects, and maybe best to talk to one of those people. Someone that works for, I don't know, someone that's high ranking at NASA, or someone that goes to like a college specifically.
Hey, Uni, I guarantee you, if somebody senior from NASA came on this channel, you would all be saying that they were lying.
I could see it now.
Listen, I wouldn't say that. I would say you're being fed the same. You're feeding us the same shit you've been fed and took as fucking as like read simply because it gives you a piece of paper that made you say, "Ooh, look at me! I'm fucking more intelligent than everybody else," because I've remembered this shit that's been fucking thrown at me and it stuck to me. So now I'm trying to do it to you, and I'm saying to you, look, don't just think about that. It doesn't make any fucking sense. But because they're fucking married to the maths and the degree and the shit that they can fucking prove, if you're in a vacuum, there's no ions. It's a vacuum. There's no fuck all.
The rocket provides its own propellant.
One lie, and that's it. The case is fucking done. And that's how I feel. You just find one, and it's usually simple, and that's it. How does it get there?
What about the Challenger?
What about it?
That whole thing is very suspicious.
Fucking, there's a vacuum in Biden's head and he can't fucking propel a word out of his mouth.
That's true.
Coherent one, anyway.
See, the whole thing about propulsion in space, the key to being able to propel in space, Jason, is you have to reach escape velocity, right? Once you can get outside of the Earth's sphere of influence,
yeah, go on.
Once you can get outside the sphere of influence of the Earth, you don't need, because if it is a vacuum, right, and I'm not saying there is a fucking vacuum, right, but if you got to escape velocity and you managed to get outside the Earth's sphere of fucking gravity, then you would fucking fly infinitely at whatever speed that you fucking escaped.
That's right. Yeah, I agree with that. But how would you
so
then adjust? So the geometry's got to be exact on, and we know that it's not, because on Apollo 13 they said that they were moving it about. They were thrusters from the side. Now, how does a thruster work in a vacuum with nothing to push against?
That's what she said.
Well, come on, no, Prince.
Sorry, it went quiet for me there.
Look, Jason has reached escape velocity. Look at he's going into orbit. Wicked. Jason has launched into orbit.
As I said before, it provides its own propellant.
But how can it provide its own propellant?
All right.
What is the propellant going to propel against? I can provide some shoes. I can provide a pogo stick. But if I ain't got the fucking ground to jump on, I'm not fucking going to go up, am I?
What's the difference between a rocket surrounded by air and a rocket producing its own air?
How can a rocket produce air? Please, it'd be instantly dissipate into the vacuum of space. There would be nothing there but there has to be a period
it wouldn't
of
dissipate fast enough from the choke of a rocket motor.
Honestly, if you're buying this, I got a fucking Porsche I want to sell you.
Well, say what you like, but all the evidence points to there are satellites.
No, what evidence? Tell me what evidence.
Well, evidence that you can see satellites orbiting the Earth.
Right. So if they're in low Earth orbit, they're still in the actual atmosphere, right? And
why don't you get an atmospheric wave?
but they're out of the atmosphere enough because the air's thin enough. We know the air thins up there, don't we?
You'd
You can only
still get
breathe
an
up to 10,000
atmospheric
feet.
wake. You'd still get an atmospheric wake.
No, but I'm
And
saying
you don't.
What do you mean you don't get an atmospheric wake? What do you think the weather system is? It's
Well,
a wake in an
weather
atmosphere,
systems
innit?
have got
The
nothing.
atmosphere
Weather
is like a
systems
sea.
have got
It's just
nothing
made
to
out of
do
air. It
with
moves
satellites
around.
that are moving, obviously out of the air, like all the what is it? The network satellites that Elon Musk bloody put up in orbit, the bloody Skytrain or whatever it's called.
Ah, all
There's
right.
no atmospheric wake. There's no atmospheric wake at all. They're outside the atmosphere, and I don't understand why you have such trouble in understanding that.
Well, right, okay. You tell me, what does it push against? If I'm on a pogo stick, right, and I jump off a cliff, right, when's the time I'm going to fucking bounce back up? When is the time I'm going to? No, just answer me. Just answer me the question. When is the time I'm going to bounce back up?
There's no comparison.
Of course, there's a comparison.
No, there isn't.
There is, because I've used the pogo stick. I've used the energy from where I am. Right, I've put the energy into the pogo stick, and I've gone over the cliff. When am I going to bounce back up? I'm not going to bounce back up straight away, am I? Because there's nothing to bounce against. I'm going to bounce when I get to the bottom.
Are you using a rocket-powered pogo stick?
Fucking what's rockets? Don't matter how powerful it is if it's got no effect
Of course
whatsoever.
it does. Of course it does. This is a simple disagreement.
Put more power to it. If something
can't
won't
accept
work,
that rockets
can't
exist
put more
that
power
work.
to it.
You just don't seem to be able to understand that
I know how a rocket works. I know how a rocket works. Right? I've seen them.
But you've seen it, but you don't agree with it.
But it needs air. Yes, exactly. It needs air.
How can air around a rocket provide more basis to a rocket's propellant from the choke of its engine? It can't.
What's he talking about? I'm talking about the actual.
That's the problem. That's the problem that you can't seem to overcome. A rocket provides its own propellant, and that's
right. And what does that propellant propel against? Because I could provide my own propellant. Couldn't I? I could provide a carrier bag or something like that. But
you could fart yourself to the moon, Jason. You're being a bit disingenuous.
I'm not being disingenuous. I genuinely don't get it. Right? I genuinely, if you could take, and you can't take your own propellant. It's like if you could take your own propellant, right? There'd be something to stop you falling over. There'd be there'd be something that would, when you fell back, you went off, it'd stop you.
So, like the guy then that invented those hand-mounted jet engines, so he can fly around the country. Yeah. Well, what's he? What's the jet doing?
Hold on, back up a second.
Propelling against the air.
How can you against the air? Are you listening to what you're saying? You seem to be saying that you could flap your arms and fly.
Well, if you got, what do you think birds do? They've just got lighter arms with feathers. That's all they've got. They've got lighter arms. How do you think an aircraft flies? It flies with a jet engine. It thrusts against the air.
No, it doesn't.
Look. A jet engine doesn't thrust against the air. Now,
a jet engine does thrust against the air, but that's not the reason it flies. It flies because the air flies faster over the top of the wing than it does underneath it.
Okay, so what does it use? An internal? Just a minute, Leeds. What does it use then? An internal combustion engine to move forward?
It uses the fact that that propeller pulls it forward.
We're talking about jets. We're talking about jets.
Jets is the same.
Right,
it just faster over the wing than it does underneath it, and that provides lift. It's called the Bernoulli effect.
I know, but you need velocity before you get lift. So how do you get the velocity? Is there an internal combustion engine, or how does that jet engine? What does that jet engine do? Does it turn the wheels?
That does work in air. Yes.
There we go.
And that's nothing to do with rocketry.
It does it against air, doesn't it? So if it's in a vacuum, it's not going to do it.
Wrong. Rockets work in air as well, Jason.
They work in air. Yeah, of course they work in air.
Yeah,
They work in air, but how can they work in a vacuum? A vacuum's got nothing to propel against. It's like me.
Propels against itself. It produces its own air.
If I'm in the I'm doing the same motion.
Can I chime in just for a second? Can I chime in just for a second here? Because about 2 months ago, there was a serious fucking incident on the space station, the IIS, right? Really, really serious, and it lost a huge amount of fucking altitude, right? And they were in fucking serious fucking problems. I don't know. I never got any more updates on what the fuck happened to it, but somehow they were able to fucking stabilize the orbit of that fucking satellite, or it was coming down, right? So how did they fucking stabilize it? Did they say a prayer?
Oh, I don't know. I don't watch it.
Well, I do. I kind of watch these sorts of things. So somehow that they were able to fucking restabilize the orbit of that falling satellite.
Well, look, satellites in low Earth orbit, innit? Look, that's my look. Let's just not talk about this. It's like fucking. Honestly, it's like talking to fucking. It's like talking to. I don't know. I don't even know what it's like. It's like talking to uni 5 years ago. It's fucking.
What are you talking about? About what?
This lot. I mean, look. If I don't know what to say. I'm a bit speechless. Let's talk about
Jason, you're allowing emotion to come into the
argument.
I'm not.
It's not emotion. It's honest. It's genuine disbelief. It's genuine. Honestly, it's genuine. I don't know whether we're just so far apart, or whether I'm like not explaining it, properly. I just can't.
All I want is someone to explain to me how a rocket works in a vacuum.
He's just said that, but it don't really. But I'm arguing it don't work. He's just said it provides its own propellant using. Exactly. But how can it provide its own propellant?
It can't, can it?
Of course it can. Bloody hell.
And I'm saying that space is not empty. Space is not a vacuum. No way.
I just don't get it. I mean, how we know a jet engine works because we see them on jet planes, aircraft, airliners, but we know that they don't turn the wheels. They don't. There's not a thing from jet that goes to wheels, and wheels make it go faster, and it goes up. It's pushed across.
Yeah,
the air in the atmosphere.
Yeah. So imagine a rocket in front of the jet engine.
But a rocket is a jet engine. It's the same sort of principle. It's the same.
No, principle. It isn't. A rocket is not a jet engine at all.
It's a principle, though. It's the same principle.
But a rocket is not a jet engine at all.
It's using combustion to propel.
Yeah. I don't see how we can have a meeting of minds here, Jason. I think we're just diametrically opposed.
I think we should do, shouldn't we? We are diametrically opposed. I just don't get. Anyway, listen.
I have a little bit of minutia. Does anybody know that the moon has a sodium tail?
I haven't heard anything about that.
The moon has a what?
No. It has a sodium tail. It's got a tail that's made from salt, and it stretches out into space. This whole thing about space being a vacuum and empty is, it's about time people fucking copped on and says it's all bullshit. Space is not a fucking vacuum. It's full of shit, full of really useful compounds and chemicals, all sorts, man. And vacuum, man.
Bullshit. Right. If you're saying space is not a vacuum, then I agree with that. Right, I agree that then if it's not a vacuum, then yes, a jet engine would work, a rocket engine would work. And
right, we're not that fucking far apart.
But we're told we are because there's nobody saying it's not a vacuum. There's nobody saying it's not a vacuum. There's nobody apart from you saying that space debris in there, rubbish.
Imagine how much shit's up there now that supposedly left. It'd be travelling at what, 60,000 miles an hour? They wouldn't survive very long.
Anyway, I think we'll leave that. It's been Bart Sibrel's been on. This is probably why we're talking about. I hope he's not listening, because he'll be listening and laughing his fucking head off at us, I think.
He'll be doing it.
Fucking rate row here.
Bart Sibrel's really
now, He'd be saying he got the part out.
Bart Sibrel's a really religious guy.
Say that again. He's what?
He's a really religious guy. He sent me a few emails pointing me in the direction of, let's just say religious stuff, that I wonder if that has any bearing on his views about.
I wouldn't imagine so. But, I think that's probably why it's important to him. If he is a religious man, that's why it's important to him that this is exposed as he sees it. So
I still think that I do think they faked the moon landings. I just disagree over the reason why. I think they faked the moon landings because they already knew there was something else up there. Such as base, I'm open to the opinion of there's extraterrestrial bases on the moon already. I don't know.
Are you going to ask him the question, or shall I, Jay?
You what?
Are you going to ask him the question, or shall I?
What question?
What's his favourite colour UFO?
What's your favourite colour UFO?
That would be invisible.
Right, okay, invisible. It's somebody we ask everybody. UFO things. I got Ben Emlyn Jones on once, and I said, Andy had got a question for you. He says, "What's your favourite colour UFO?" Oh, that were it. No, me and Andy were on, and I'd said to him, I said to Andy before, I was fucking trolling him. I said to Andy before, I said, last time you asked him what his favourite colour UFO is, didn't you? And he went, I didn't, did I? I says, yeah, you fucking did, you idiot. I think it was Gary Heseltine, UFO man. Anyway, he came on, and I said, look, I said to him, what's your favourite colour UFO? Andy wants to know what your favourite colour UFO is. And it became a bit of a, because you get a UFO guy on, and that's not really a question to ask, is it? Sort of an Ali G question. What's your favourite colour UFO, isn't it? But Andy were into his UFOs, so there we go. What are we doing?
I'm going to ask Principian if he's got. Have you followed the work of Richard Hoagland over the last?
Yeah, I have. After a long time, I just can't accept what he says. I really just can't accept what he says at all.
That don't mean he's wrong, especially with you.
No, it don't mean he's wrong.
It's really compelling. I have to say, like you go through all the images. Like he's done images from the moon and from Mars about like artifacts that are in images, which, like, when you look at them, like and you follow what he's talking about, you have to know the choice but to fucking start seeing these fucking remains of old bases or structures that are on the moon and on Mars, and like, it doesn't mean he's wrong, like, but I know it's just same Incipium, it's like, okay, right, we'll have to put that to bed because we'll never be able to get a confirmation on this, so we'll put it to bed for a while.
I looked at Richard Hoagland's stuff, and his proofs seem to be massively magnified pictures of the ground. And I a long time ago, I was using Photoshop to analyze the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and the more I magnified the pictures, the more I saw structures like what Richard Hoagland was showing. I think it's just an aberration of magnification. I don't think it's really bases or anything like that.
Yeah, because you get a lot of these people, like, they're doing these close-up images of what's down in Antarctica, and they're finding pyramids, they're finding all sorts of fucking crazy shit, like, you know. But to be honest, like, they're just super magnified, and you know, you could be looking at fucking anything, man.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, I agree. I agree.
Although some of those images that he got hold of, like, were really high fucking nice, man. You know, they really were really good quality images.
The only thing that makes me think is the Disclosure project, when they all went in front of those senators. I forget what it was called, but they got a woman who claimed to work for NASA that airbrushed pictures of UFOs out of NASA images. Now, I don't know whether that's true or not, but I just bear it in mind and sort of file it away as a possibility.
The face on Mars was probably one of the best known and most talked about artifacts on Mars, and like, you know, and there was that film as well too, which sort of kind of like depicted the whole conspiracy theory of the face on fucking Mars, wasn't there?
Yeah.
What was that film? Does anybody remember?
I'm not sure, but let me ask you, what do you think then about Gary McKinnon? Gary McKinnon claimed to have seen actual photographs of UFOs when he hacked the NASA website.
Yeah, what he obviously was on something, man. Like, but to be honest, like, it's like everything else, man. You know, how do you verify fucking anything? Like, you know, he may have fucking found fucking marshmallows in their fucking database, but how do you fucking verify? No, you need fucking third-party verification, you know? Can't just take the word of some dude, you know?
I agree. I mean, there's a part of me that thinks that NASA would have certain photographs or a certain particular server for any naughty hackers that might log in to give them false information. I mean, they're all about making other countries spend more money on useless projects.
Yeah. It's probably just another fucking psyop, you know, and it's more fucking theater to keep people fucking busy, man. And would generate a whole fucking court case about. I think Bart Sibrel was sort of like hinting at that when I asked that loaded fucking question about international politics and how it might have had an effect on the American sort of like push to get to the fucking moon, right? You know, and it, you know, you get an awful lot of these fucking operations, I think, and do you know what? We'll never fucking know the truth of it, you know. Not in our lifetimes, I don't think. Fucking hell, Raconteurs News Telegram is going fucking nuts there in the background.
Oh dear! I put Webby on. I give Webby the link if he wants to come on. I just I'm fucking skinning up, me. You all have fucking turned me to weed. I can't believe it,
yeah, well, maybe like Webby knows how to fucking maybe it's possible to fucking maneuver in space with gas, you know.
Well, I'm going to do. I think we'll do to half an hour. So we've done 2.5 hours. So we've got till half an hour. So if you want to come on, anybody, and talk, then you know you're welcome. There's myself, Principium 236, Uni Black Sister, aka Taylor over there in Washington, the Incel, and Jimmy Hagan. Jimmy Hagan in the bottom corner looking like a fucking, I don't know, Finn boy fucking arse or whatever his fucking name is. And then Super Leet is on the phone, the old dog and bone. So if you want to come and join this fucking motley crew, we're going to stop until 2.5 hours. So that'll be 10:30. So we're going to stop until 10:30, and then I might do the after show thing if anybody. Oh yeah, link to Telegram. Yeah, I'll find link to Telegram while I'm at it, and then I've got it somewhere. It's at
How are you finding
Raconteurs
Telegram,
News.
Jason?
It's what?
How are you finding Telegram, Jason?
Oh, it's all right. I find it on my phone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got it on
I've
my
noticed
pad and all that.
I noticed you forwarded your first message today. Wicked. Well done.
There you go, see. Yeah, but I've made it. I did make it public, but then that Apple Charlotte came in and just like started spamming it and didn't even join. So I thought, right, I'll just make it members only. Not against her, like it's just that I did. I just thought I'll make it. So that people have to join to be able to post out. So yeah, it's every. I'll find a link to it, and I'll post it up in the chat for tonight. So boys and girls, we've got half an hour left. What are we going to talk about?
Well, first of all, I just want to say, I do really think that one thing that's difficult and about this whole conspiracy field in general is that some of us, and I'm not referring to anyone here, I'm just saying that in general, we get a little bit too focused on the idea of like, oh, if anyone says anything contrary to what I've heard, then it's bullshit. It's like everyone's so willing to call each other either a disinformation agent or a freaking or a shill or anything like that. And that's I think that's a big problem, because then it comes down to, it's just like, what's the point of having debates or going back and forth or trying to share information if we're just going to accuse each other of being a freaking... Yes? What'd you say?
Yeah, I think that's very unfair. You wouldn't be here to start with.
I think all of us are, including myself, are guilty of that. Like, of just accusing like everyone of just being a shill.
How long do you think we've been going?
Say again?
How long do you think we've been going?
What do you mean? Going on what?
This show.
YouTube.
Oh, how many years it's been? Oh, I don't know. I wasn't here I wasn't here at the start, so I don't know.
6 years.
6 years. Very nice.
Yeah.
Well, you guys lasted longer than actually no. Well, I mean, you're still on YouTube, even though that people like Richie Allen and James Corbett and all of them have been deleted off YouTube.
So if we didn't let people have to say, no one would listen to us, would they?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
I disagree with that guy about space. I think so does Jason. But he's allowed his opinion.
Yeah, so shut up, Taylor. Man. No, Taylor's all right.
That's what I like about you, Jason.
Taylor, what?
He says some stupid stuff sometimes.
Oh, yeah, he says it all the time.
Taylor,
Jason.
this week is to look into Rudolf Hess.
He knows all about
Rudolf Hess. Oh, my God, that whole
Rudolf
case.
Hess' fucking grandson.
Yeah,
Yo, Rudolf Hess, man. Murdered.
What were you going to say, Principium?
No, I was just going to say, Jason, that you allow all points of view on your show. You never discriminate, whether you agree with them or disagree with them. You still give them a platform on your show, and that's just absolutely fantastic.
Well, Jason, are you willing to have on people that say that 9/11 was was not an inside job and was as the government told us? Like,
yeah, of course he will. Of course he will. It was the Arabs. The Arabs did it. Blame them.
The Arabs.
Thank you for saying that. I appreciate that, because I'd like to think that we do. And do you know what I mean?
Fucking we now, is it? We? Where the fuck have you been? I'm only messing, mate. I know it's fucking we.
You fucking disappeared for a while, didn't you?
Yeah, I had my fucking leg chopped off. Go on. We've been.
It's just we wouldn't have been going as long if we didn't let people have to say. And I'm sorry, what's he called again with his funny name?
Oh, Bart.
Mate. Yeah. You're entitled to your opinion, and I just disagree with you.
But this is the thing is, like, I think there has to come a point of where it moves beyond opinions and moves on to, if we really want to discover the truth about things, we can't just amount
Yeah,
to,
but people don't though. That's the thing, right? People are very addictive. They get addicted to certain things. Some say people it's video games. Some people it's drugs. Some people it's alcohol. Some people it's sex. Some people get addicted, and most people are addicted to fear. So they love it. So if you take them out of that fear, you're going to be taking something that's really a fundamental part of their life away. And they fucking don't want you to do that because people don't like the change. It's very difficult. And ramming it down people's throats is just not going to fucking cut it. Which is why I let people come on here and say things. All right, me and Principium 236 had a disagreement before, but that's that. It's end of disagreement. We're back. We just as we were before. Didn't know each other.
Are you talking about cognitive dissonance, Jason?
Yeah, people are addicted to it.
Yeah.
They're addicted to being fearful. Look how quickly. There was somebody I saw, and I had to get rid of them on Facebook. And as soon they were moaning about Corona being over, and then first fucking thing they're doing is they're going to get clothes for Ukrainian kids. It just didn't make any sense. It was like you've just been, they run towards it. This fear and this despair. It's like an addiction to despair. We've got it, and we've got to get out of it, and we can't get out of it because until we start feeling happy in ourselves, we're not going to get out of it.
Well, have you noticed how it's changed from being fearful of coronavirus to being fearful of Russian invasion of Ukraine?
Yeah, exactly. What's the common factor? Fear.
Yeah.
They said today, World War. I couldn't believe it.
Oh, get fucking.
And how do we get everybody on board though? That's which is the key
we
thing.
don't, do we? What we have to do is we have to live our lives. This is our lives to live. Fuck everyone else's life.
I was nearly finished, Jason, and I'm thinking that these jabs will actually get us closer to that fucking inflection point, because do you know what? The people who are susceptible to all this fucking bullshit and all this fucking programming, they're the ones running for jabs. They're the ones with fucking Ukrainian flags on their social medias. So, and I think I have to say, I'm looking at I'm not uber focused on what's going on with the down at the moment, but I have to say, like, from the cursory little look I get at it from just from passing, but just from generally just not paying any attention, but just taking a quick look every now and again, it seems that the guys are right. The death rate in 18 to 64-year-olds seems to be up about 40%, right? And this seems to be across the fucking board. And I think these jabs are going to get us to this inflection point where we can sort of like get rid of a fucking pile of fucking idiots, man, who are just fucking constantly in the negative and just constantly fucking susceptible to bullshit, you know. Like, you know, it's a pragmatic view, but I don't know what your thoughts are.
Well, I'll tell you what I think. Everybody should concentrate and make this the priority, right? The memories such as I had on Sunday, which was my wife's birthday, Easter Sunday, when I got a phone call from Dinny on Skype, a video call, and he were in middle of woods in his car, and he were fucking pissed, and it were only about 1:30, and he were fucking sat there, oh, Jason, oh, fucking hell, Jason. Oh,
what's the point? What's the point?
Jason,
you know what he does? He does that thing where he just fucking repeats his said over and over again. He goes, oh, you know, Jason, it's Stuart. He's going, you and Stuart coming over here. Oh, just tell him to hire a car. Tell him to hire a car. I said, look, Vinny,
Jason, why do you and Dinny always call when it's like 3 a.m. for me?
Because we want to talk behind your back. It fucking were you. Fucking in middle of woods. It was in fucking middle of woods, honestly. Fucking, he was in his car and he's just fucking talking. He says, "Look at this, look at it." He kept doing the same thing. Look at me, Woods, look at me, Woods. I says, "What's going on?" Oh, I went into the village and I went for a pint and I met some bloke and we got talking and he bought me a few pints and fucking in his car, Woods, like, not driving, just sitting bare chested on it. And it was a lovely day by the looks of it. So these are the things you need to concentrate on and remember the things like that, because it's fucking you'll drive yourself up fucking wall thinking about all other bollocks. Take notice and know what's going on, but fucking hell, it's just.
You have to be able to flow through it. Yeah, you have to be able to flow through it without letting it affect you, and that's the fucking key to it, And people on this channel are very well fucking tuned in and seem like the perfect bunch that will be well aware of this sort of fucking shit. That, like, because we've discussed it like fucking so many fucking times. We know what the fucking game is, and we know we don't have to be fucking worried about it, so they can hype up the fucking fear anytime they fucking want. But at least we have a small community who are sort of like, we kind of know what's going on because we talk to each other and we're not afraid to talk about the fucking shit.
Well, I mean, it's not just about fear. There's other factors that go into it as well. Like say for example, this whole Ukraine thing. I'd say this is less about fear and more about driving on the emotional aspect of people, as in, like, look at these poor people in Ukraine, they're suffering. Oh, it's kind of like the whole baby incubator story thing. It's like, you feel sorry for them.
All right, right.
Basically, it's playing on sympathy.
They fucking got a dog out today, didn't they? They got a dog out. Did you see that other dog that had fucking escaped bombing in Ukraine? Carpet bombing or some fucking shit.
Was that the dog that was sleeping on the left side? His left paw was damaged.
I don't know. It were like a golden retriever or something like that. We had long hair and we got a fucking nice bird next to it. Like holding it.
I didn't see that one.
That adopted it. She was a model and she'd adopted this fucking dog that had run away from war-torn, raining down bombs in Ukraine. And it were a fucking episode of the Littlest Hobo when he fucking finally gets adopted by a millionaire.
So, as they always say, truth is the first casualty of war.
Yeah, it's just like I think the biggest example of that is World War II.
Yeah, well, you're getting it now. I mean, don't expect the mass media to tell you the truth of whatever's happening. They're gonna pick
them to tell me fucking truth about
point of view. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but we also have to remember that we also have to remember that the alternative media can tell a lot of things wrong or outright lies as well.
And I mean this seriously. I've not been able to see any pictures of it. Does it actually look real?
What? This
Supposedly war.
Haha, fucking Rotherham have lost as well.
Well, fucking, you're looking at. Well, Wednesday won.
Yeah, Wednesday have won.
Wednesday have won.
Yeah, we're fourth now.
Have Liverpool won?
I don't know. Who cares? Let me have a look.
Well, I do. I fucking do.
Liverpool beat Man United 4-0. There you go.
Someone in the chat was saying something about how mathematics is just a language, and that's all it does is just give false authority to people who claim that they know more than they actually do.
And your point?
Just saying, like,
it's fucking uni. It didn't have a point.
No, I'm just saying, like, there's like, it's mathematics just nothing, like, is it nothing that means, like, does it not mean anything?
Well, it don't, does it?
Well, mathematics is an interesting one because you can
It can
The
be. It
universe
can be.
seems to be... Yeah, carry on, Jason.
It can be manipulated for anything. Like I said, there's a mathematical formula that says that you can fucking hang an elephant off a cliff, but with its tail tied to a daisy, and it'll fucking hold it. You know, we can do it with maths. It's magician
Yeah,
stuff.
that's true.
But mathematics can also be very, very useful because, you know, you can take observed fucking facts from the universe around us and put it into a formula to make things a little bit more reliable. So thus they're able to make things like really tall cranes, and they're able to make fucking rockets that can go out into space and go to the fucking Mars and just make right-hand turns and maybe take a detour to Leeds United.
Yes,
You know,
mathematics.
You're very pessimistic, aren't you, Jim?
You know what, Dinny had said, don't you, if he were here? Fucking Jim. Fucking hell, Jimmy.
Fucking point.
Fuck off, Jimmy. You fucking.
Fuck off yourself. I'll show you my fucking chest. Look at that chest. Does that say fuck off?
Go on, Leeds, what were you saying?
That's what pissed me off when you guess your American guess, and they say math rather than maths, and it pisses me off.
Oh, right, you didn't say the S at the end.
Yeah.
No, you see, he didn't know. He doesn't know etiquette, does he? I mean, he's American, for fuck's sake. We don't. You see, we say maths, uni in this country. We don't say math. We say maths because it's
Why?
mathematics. Because it's mathematics. So
I mean, I guess
there you go. It's maths, but you say math because you're fucking lazy fat cunts who fucking eat too much fucking stodge and fucking. Not all of you, no, I'm joking. Jason is smoking in space, so there can't be a vacuum cleaner.
And Spanish is wondering what the fuck I'm smoking tonight. Look, we're in fucking space here. Not smoke. Can't smoke in a vacuum.
Oh dear me.
I might ask for this just because we have a new guest here. What do you think about the fact? What do you think about the idea that nuclear weapons are just fiction? They're just a fear tactic, and that they don't actually exist. As in, like, the idea of, like, you know, radiation, you know, that, you know, caused by, like, say the atom bomb, for example.
Fucking hands up.
Well, look, if space is a vacuum, there's no fucking radiation in it either, because it's got to be fucking empty. So it's all bullshit, man.
Yes. Let's sit here and in this space station and rock. See, and I'll be on one of them videos next, won't I? And they'll say, "Look at this. You can see it's obvious that he's not doing that." You know, this guy is obviously.
You'll be a viral TikTok, Jason.
Someone says I look like Kubrick's Star Child. Listen, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna shut this down because I'm knackered now when I get my thing down and everything. But what I'm going to do now is, if everyone sticks about, everybody who's here, what I'm going to do is, if people who want to come on and just chat with us, I'm leaving the open, but the broadcast is going to end. So it's just something I'm trying, just so that some people might want to come on and just have their opinion, but not really want to, be live on air. So I'm just doing that. So I'm just be about half an hour, and everybody who's on can talk to their heart's content. So if you want to do that, I'm going to put the link in the chat. You click on that link, and it will bring you in. That one, and it shall bring you in, and then you can, if you want, it's just for people that, if you just for everyone to have a chat, that's not
mentally ill people
or anything. Nobody's
mentally ill people.
Yeah, so it's mentally ill. There, it's fucking mental. Fucking mental hospital radio. So yeah, that's what we're doing now. So thanks to everybody for listening. Thanks to everyone who's been in the chat room as well, taking control in the chat room. All the bouncers, Dinny's been in there. I've noticed. I'm sure he'll pop up in the after chat as well. So I'm limited to 10 spaces. So there's 4 of us on now. But Leeds is on phone, so there's only 4 of us on now. So there's 6 spaces. So if you want to come on, no pressure, but you can have a chat and do stuff and what have you. And then it's easier for me. I can take my screen down and everything, and everyone gets to talk to each other for a bit longer. Just what I'm trying. Anyway, it's the end of the show. Thank you to what's his
Bart Sibrel.
Bart Sibrel. Yeah, thank you, Una. Thank you to Bart Sibrel for joining us as well. Don't forget to get his book or go to his website as well, sibrel.com. Get his book Moon Man, and watch. If you've not watched it, you've got to at least watch it. A funny thing happened on the way to the moon, and Astronauts Gone Wild. I probably wouldn't. I wouldn't so strongly recommend, but I'd still recommend it, but I wouldn't strongly recommend it, if you know what I mean. As much
Is
as
it related to Girls Gone Wild?
But yeah, but you've got to have a look at them both. And I'll see you back on Friday. Thanks, lads, who's come on. Like I said, stick around, and we might be joined by some other people. So thanks to everybody. See you all later. I'll see you Friday. I'll see you on Friday. Oh, it's going to be dead much fun.